Hi folks, this is your video for Notes 3.5, which is on how and why political parties change and adapt over time. So we're going to be looking at largely why the influence of political parties has decreased over time and how they've changed and adapted to fit modern needs, what the people of 2020 need. So your objective for this video is to explain how and why political parties change and adapt. So the first thing that I want to start with really are changes in party structure over time. And we're going to be talking about something here in these next few slides called party realignment. Party realignment means that there is a change in the underlying electoral forces due to change in party identification, right? Something is going on that changes the type or demographic of person that is aligned or identifies with the parties. Now, these political realignments or party realignments are marked by something called critical elections. And these elections reveal very sharp and lasting changes in loyalties to political parties. And oftentimes, this is due to new or major issues that come up. Right. So for some reason, when we're looking at these critical elections, people will shift allegiance from one party to another. And this alignment can be caused by one of two things. One, the party is so badly defeated that basically it fades into oblivion, and a new party is going to emerge as the dominant political party. This has happened several times in our history. Or this realignment of voters can also occur when those voters, and a large block of them, shift their allegiance from one party to another because of some crisis, whether that's a social issue, an economic issue, or a political issue. So I know on your notes, it says that there are 5 realignment periods. We actually have 6 plus present day, so sorry for the typo there. But I want to talk about the major realignment periods where we start to see this shift in voter allegiance between different political parties. So we're going to do a little bit of history here. I will be brief and give you exactly what it is that you need to know. But the very first major realignment period was basically the early years of our country in 1789 to 1800. And at this point, we really don't have parties yet. These are not official political parties. Many political scientists view the Federalists and Anti-Federalists as our first unofficial parties. Really, they're just factions, right? And if you remember, all about the debate between the role of the central government and how big that central government should be, especially after the failure of the Articles of Confederation. Federalists are going to be dominant in this period of time. They're going to win that ratification of the Constitution, and they're going to win the presidency for the first 3 terms, right? And those Federalists were for a stronger national government under that Constitution. Now, the Anti-Federalists opposed that strong national government, and they did favor states' rights and civil liberties, just as a refresher. We then see another kind of realignment during 1800 to 1824. And during this time period, we see a weakening influence of the Federalists because they're going to maintain their beliefs in a loose interpretation of the Constitution in order to strengthen a nation or the nation. And the Democratic Republicans are really going to take over and be dominant over the Federalists. And the Federalists in this era are going to kind of fade out. And these Democratic Republicans are also called Jeffersonians. They're going to put less emphasis on a strong union and more on states' rights. So they do take a lot of influence from the anti-Feds. The third era or major time period of realignment happened in 1824 to 1860. And with this, we really see a realignment centered on Democrats or Jacksonians. And we're going to start to see for the first time that term Democrat be used. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily what it means today. We're going to see more alignments and elections that shape the modern use of Democrat. But These Democrats in this period, or Jacksonians, are going to kind of focus themselves around Andrew Jackson and his idea of democracy. And this is going to be a time period of greater participation in politics. We've seen an expansion of suffrage over time in these eras, a greater democracy for the common man versus the aristocracy or the elite. And that's going to be a huge boost for these Democrats when it comes to the South and the West. So the Democrats at this point are going to gain the Southern voters of the country and the Western voters of the country. And this is also a time period where we see a change in the structure of political parties as well during this time. We start to see that semi-independent nature of the party structure come into play. The state and local party organizations are going to be created, nominating conventions, which we'll talk about when we look at campaigns and stuff, but those are going to begin because more people are voting. There's more people to appeal to when it comes to elections themselves. Now, the Democrats are going to follow in the footsteps of these Democratic Republicans and follow many of their principles. So then from 1860 to 1896, we see our fourth major realignment, and this is in the era of the division over slavery. So this is what we consider to be the Civil War era or the Reconstruction era, centering themselves around Abraham Lincoln. And we see a decisive shift or realignment from Democrats to Republicans in terms of dominance. So Democrats are going to become the second place party. They're not in between this period, this era, they're only going to win one federal election, and the Republicans are going to become the dominant party. Now, the Democrats are going to still be aligned at this point with the South. Your Southern voters are typically going to vote Democratic. The wage earner, the minimum wage, right? Your skilled workers are going to be focused on the Democratic Party. And a large number of immigrants, as well as Catholics and factory workers, are who are going to rally themselves around the Democrats at this point. Now, Republicans are going to be, like I said, the dominant party. They're going to free the slaves under Lincoln, and they're going to be the ones that are reconstructing the Union, and they're allied or aligned with industrial interests. And it's during this point in American history that we start to see the Republicans referring to themselves as the Grand Old Party or the GOP. They're pro-growth and pro-business. And what we see happen as because the Republicans freed African Americans are going to side with this party that freed them. And as African Americans are awarded suffrage in the years after the Civil War, they're going to vote largely Republican as well. Then in 1896, we see another shift through 1932. Republicans are going to continue to dominate during this time because it is an era of big business. And remember, they were allied during this time with industrial and pro-business agendas. There is an alignment or a realignment based on economic factors. Republicans are going to be aligned with big business, industry, urban interest, which is, as we've looked at, very different from what we see today. Democrats are really going to evolve during this point and become a little bit more modern in terms of what we think of a liberal or democratic party. The Democrats are going to still represent the South and the Midwest. They're going to represent the workers. They're going to represent those hit hard by financial issues that we'll see during this period in American history. Democrats are going to support the prohibition of alcohol, and they're going to start to focus on class conflict and workers' rights, right? We're going to see the Democrats start to push for unions, regulation of protection of workers. And that is a key Democratic Party platform that we see into the modern era today. Now, from 1932 to arguably 1968, Democrats are going to dominate, completely dominate. And part of that is this is in the aftermath of the Great Depression and in the New Deal. This is the first time in history that Blacks are going to vote Democrat over Republican. which is a voting trend that we see continue into this day, right? Democratic Party at this point is going to be favorable during this time because of the social safety nets that are offered, like Social Security, work programs, right? A lot of people believe that the Democratic Party is what's needed to solve social problems. It's going to rein in the corruption of big business. We're going to see civil liberties being at the forefront of the Democratic Party's agenda, as well as during this time, we see increased participation, right? More suffrage is being expanded, like to women and minorities, for example. And what we see happen is this group called the New Deal Coalition is going to form. And a coalition is basically a group of voters that vote a specific way. And this New Deal Coalition is going to form around FDR's programs during the New Deal. And it's going to be, your Democratic states, your local party organizations, but it's also going to be key groups as well. Your labor unions, your blue collar workers, those in poverty, your minorities. That's going to be the New Deal coalition that continuously votes for the Democratic Party throughout this era. Now, let's talk about present day. The major parties have continued on similar ideological paths since the 1930s through the 60s. There really hasn't been much of a shift, really, in terms of being called, a realignment. But we have seen some key trends that I wanted to point out. There has been a significant regional realignment since the 1950s and 60s. After the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Acts, the Voting Rights Acts are going to cause the Democrats to lose their Southern support, which they had since the 1800s. And now what we see is a breakup of that New Deal coalition. The South is no longer going to support the Democrats, and a lot of Southern, predominantly whites, are going to join the Republican Party. And we see that regional alignment that we see today, where our coastal regions are Democratic and liberal, and our Midwest and Southern states are more Republican or conservative. We've also seen a trend toward de-alignment, and that is where a growing number of citizens are becoming independents or turning away from politics altogether. And why this has happened, there are a couple of reasons. During the 1960s and 70s, the United States is faced with the Vietnam War, which was very, very unpopular. And Nixon's Watergate scandal is also going to bring about quite a bit of mistrust of the government as well as parties. People are no longer trusting political parties. And we see voter turnout has decreased significantly since then because of that mistrust. And party loyalty as a result has decreased as well. And this has led us into an era of what we call divided government, where politics is one party controlling the White House and another party controls one or both chambers or parts of Congress. And I believe we talked about this in our last video, but this can create what we call gridlock, right? As we're seeing more independents split their ballot, that means that it's more likely that one party will end up in one part of the federal government versus another. And that can be an issue when it comes to actually making policies. Now, other ways and reasons that political parties change, we've seen a shift in recent years to candidate-centered campaigns, whereas historically, voters would identify with political parties more than candidates. But in the 1960s, we start to see the widespread use of television creating a shift to more candidate-centered politics. And the reason why is kind of twofold. Candidates are going to build a following based on their personality rather than their party affiliation. And this, I think, in our lifetime can be clearly seen with President Trump. President Trump, before running on the Republican ticket, was not a Republican. He's arguably a populist or more like an independent. At various times, he's even run as a Democrat or believed himself to be a Democrat. But what we saw was a huge following surrounding him versus the Republican Party itself. So President Trump in general built that following and was able to be largely as successful as he was because he could shift focus to him, right? He was the reason why people were voting Republican. And we've also seen the use of television kind of be a negative when it comes to political parties because TV shows people information, right? TV, especially in the 1960s, is going to show the American public the Vietnam War. This is the first televised war in American history and how horrible it was. And also at the same time, you have Watergate unfolding. So you have this distrust, the lies, the free press is revealing all of this corruption, and society began to question political institutions, including political parties. And also, candidate-centered campaigns also weaken political parties even further, right? With the rise of social media, the internet, candidates can now speak directly to voters versus relying on political parties to do that. And once they are in office, then candidates are less beholden to those party elites, those at the top of the party, and can wield more personal power once they are in office. Other ways that political parties or reasons parties change over time is that parties change in the coalitions that they try to appeal to. So each party has a core demographic group or demographic groups that they try to appeal to, and they're continually trying to broaden their appeal to gain more voters. So taking a look at their data from past elections, looking at where they can maybe appeal and broaden their voter base to try and win elections. So what I see here, or what I have here on the right, this is data from 2020. And these are the demographic groups that each party tried to basically gain a following in. And you can see where each party shifted their focus and maybe gained or lost votes. And parties and candidates will shape their policy positions to attract demographic voters that they believe they need to win elections. So one of the key focal points, one of the key coalitions that the Republican Party tried to gain was the Hispanic vote. And as you can see, it was a pretty significant shift from 2016 to 2020. President Trump gained that ground pretty largely in states like Florida, for instance. Campaign finance laws have also caused political parties to change, and they've had to adapt over time. Since the 1970s, laws have been put into place and Supreme Court decisions have implemented rules about campaign finance. And we'll talk about this next part of the unit. But what this means is we've seen that there's been a lot of regulation in terms of who can campaign and who can provide funds for campaigns and how much. And that has led to the weakening of the political party as well, because candidates are now less reliant on the party for money when campaigning. They can get independent donors. The people can donate money to campaigns as well. So they're less reliant on that political party. And, now when they get into office, they're more likely to be independent and do as they wish. Now, changes in communication and data management technology, it is what it sounds like, right? As we've gotten into 2020 and modern tech, new technologies in polling, database mining, right? Pulling data from social media has been huge. And that allows parties to gain insights into voter preferences. And they can figure out who to target in their campaigns more and more. Now, obviously, that could be abused. However, that has allowed political parties to adapt and try to, like we talked about on that last slide, appeal to different coalitions to gain more votes. All right, guys, so that is our video for today. Your goal was to explain how and why political parties change and adapt over time. Pay attention to the objective in Edpuzzle to make sure that you're answering exactly what you need to. And let me know if you guys have questions. If something is unclear, I'll talk to you later. See ya.